thought I would do is I'd start with a few slides and actually kind of take you through an overview of how we would estimate a package implementation. And then after a few minutes, I'll actually take you through an example using the actual SLIM estimate product and actually show you how it would be done in the tool itself. So I figured I'd start with a quick background on QSM. We were actually founded in 1978. We're based in McLean, Virginia, and our main focus of business is project estimating, planning and oversight, and as well as project benchmarking. We're mostly known for the SLIM product suite and our QSM consulting services. So a lot of our clients will go ahead and license our products, run the estimates themselves, and leverage our support. Other companies like to hire us to do independent estimates, benchmarking work, project tracking and oversight, things like that. So we offer both opportunities. We have one of the largest industry databases around. What we use this for, we do a lot of research, and it allows us to calibrate the SLIM tools, and it allows us to pull in certain databases, like for specific types of application types. So, for example, today I'm going to be showing how to actually pull a sample from our SAP database and actually use that to customize and calibrate to SAP types of projects. So that'll be kind of my main focus today, showing how we tailor the SLIM tool and how we estimate package implementations. Also, after I go through the slides and then I take you through a demonstration of SLIM, we'll allow some time at the end for questions as well. So this is kind of an overview of the SLIM estimating process. What we try to do is pull together some information up front before the project even starts. So we like to get a handle on how much work we're going to actually have to deliver, and here in the diagram we're calling it software size. We want to get a handle on the efficiency of the process, the group that's working in the project, the environment that you're working in, things like that. We're going to call that a productivity index in the demo. You'll see that later. And we want to get a feel for what your goals are, what your constraints are. So we want to get a handle on the budget that you're working with, the duration constraints that you might have, and the total amount of people that you might have available for the project. So once we pull this information together, then we'll actually generate an estimate. One of the nice things about using SLIM is we don't have to have a lot of information up front. Usually when people get started with a project, there's not a lot of information available. So with the SLIM estimating process, what we're going to try to do is get a macro level estimate early, even before you do any detailed planning. Okay, so want to get a feel for what's the right schedule, the right amount of people, and the right budget before we do a bottoms-up plan. So that's kind of our starting point. So once we get the information together, a little bit of information up front, we'll generate an estimate, and then we'll look at some practical alternatives, multiple estimates for the same release. And then we'll go ahead and maybe we're meeting with a group of people, maybe we're meeting with the customer. We'll try to make an educated decision on what plan should we go forward with. And then we'll go ahead and communicate that plan. That's the output column that you see there. So we'll look at the cost and the duration and the reliability estimates, and then we'll want to present that to management or the customer so that we can get agreement on it. So pulling together a little bit of information up front, generating the estimates, looking at the plans, and then communicating that to management or to the customer. That's kind of at a high level how the estimation process should work. What we want to do in a package implementation environment is customize your life cycle to an SAP type of project or a package type of project. So initially what we'll do, and at QSM, usually what you do is you start with a 2-day class, and then we get on WebEx or something like that, or we'll go on site, and we'll actually help you, we'll teach you how to build a template within SLIM. It's not hard to do, probably about an hour to teach you how to do it, pull the information together, and then we go ahead and show you how to set it up in SLIM. So what we want to do is take your phases and milestones and tailor those to an SAP type of environment, or if you're doing some other type of package like Oracle or something like that, we'll go ahead and tailor that. Phases, milestones, task level information that you might have. We'll create a life cycle template that maps to what you're actually doing. Next thing we're going to want to do is, and I'm going to take you through this in the SLIM tools as well. This is just kind of an overview. Next thing we're going to want to do is get a feel for what you have to deliver. We want to define the work as you see it. Okay, so if we're taking SAP types of packages, what we're going to try to do is get a feel for the business processes that you're doing. Okay? So business process meaning, some type of description of what needs to be done in your company. So we want to go ahead and figure out how long is it going to take us to size that configuration work. Okay? So business process meaning, like if I'm using this, for those of you that are already familiar with SLIM, an example of a business scenario might be kind of a high-level business process. So maybe the environment, the tools environment part of SLIM. A more detailed business process might be what lies underneath that in the SLIM tool. For example, setting up the phases and milestones or something like that. So just want to go ahead and define what you have to get done in your company and figure out, kind of an idea of how much effort it's going to take to configure that type of work. Once we get a definition for your high-level business processes and scenarios and detailed business processes, then we're going to want to go ahead and get a feel for the custom development work that you're going to have to deliver. And we would define these in an SAP project as a RISE-F object: reports, interfaces, conversions, extensions, and forms. Okay, so that's kind of how we're looking at it initially. Now in this slide, we're just showing an example of an SAP product called Solution Composer. So in this example, financial accounting might be an example of a high-level business process, or as we're defining it, a business scenario. And then underneath that financial accounting, where we see general ledger, accounts receivable, accounts payable, that would be more of a business process or a detailed business process. Okay, so that's kind of how we're defining it as we're going ahead and trying to measure how we're going to configure everything. So as we're getting ready to run our estimate, we want to get a feel for early sizing, high-level business requirements. And then as we get a little bit more information, we want to revise that information and get a refined feel for the technical requirements. So early sizing, we might break it out like this: high-level business processes, detailed business processes, and RISE-F objects. So in this example, you can see I've got 3 columns. I've got the component name, I've got another column in the middle for implementation units per component, and then I've got number of components. So in this example, I've got 5 high-level business processes, 45 detailed business processes, and 15 RISE-F objects. The middle column is, we're defining it as implementation units per component. This could mean how many steps does it take on average to create that component or that business process. We also can call this a gearing factor. We're trying to get a feel for the complexity of the work that we have to deliver. And then we're going to go ahead and set that up in SLIM so we can generate our estimates. This would be an example of getting a little bit more information. We want to break it down in a little bit more detail. So here we're breaking out those business requirements into complexity bins. So we're looking at simple, high-level business requirements, average business requirements, and complex business requirements. And then we're going to break it down even further into simple, average, and complex detailed business requirements. So as you can see, I've got, for example, for the simple business ones, I've got 1 simple business requirement taking about 800 implementation units to complete, or 800 steps to create that action. So if this were a software development project, this could be 800 lines of code per requirement. If this were an infrastructure type of project, this could be number of steps that it takes to install the software. Okay, so we're just trying to get a feel for the complexity of the work, and we're trying to tailor that to an SAP environment. Once we get a handle on sizing, what we're going to try to do is get a handle on the efficiency of the project. Okay, so the way we do that is we use what we call a productivity index within SLIM. So once size is determined, we're going to use a relevant data set from either the QSM database or the customer's own historical database. So if you're using SLIM now, you'll know that you've got the SLIM estimate tool, and then what comes with it is the SLIM data manager. The data manager is where you would capture your historical projects. And we don't need a lot of information, really. We want to get some basic information up front if we can. How much work was delivered on a project that's been completed, how much effort was spent, and what was the duration. Once we get that information, we can calculate a productivity index, and then we can get a measure of efficiency and productivity. A couple ways to get it, again, from the industry database or your own history. If we're getting it from the QSM database, we also have the opportunity to answer some questions about our environment to tune that industry number a little bit more towards us. As you can see on the slide here, it'll ask us some questions like rating the technical complexity of the project, skill level of the team, things like that. you can actually, within SLIM now, in the latest release 8.0, we're actually able to tailor those questions and set them on a weighting scale, so you can determine as a user which questions are more important, how do I want to phrase these questions, what's relevant to the project that I'm looking at. Once we get a handle on size, what we have to deliver, and that productivity factor or index, we're going to go ahead and actually run the estimate. So what SLIM is going to do for us, it's going to let us run the estimate. It's going to give us the numbers. So as you can see on this slide here, I've got kind of a summary of the estimate here. I've got a risk gauge to my left that gives me the percentage chance I have of getting done on time. So in addition to generating the estimate, it's also going to let us look at risk as well and multiple planning alternatives, and it's also going to give us the ability to sanity check the estimate with industry to see if it's reasonable. Now, I mentioned the QSM database and actually using that to customize SLIM to SAP types of projects. Well, in this example here, I'm going to go ahead and just take you through a few slides of how we might break out the SAP database. Here I've got 4 basic demographics listed. We could go through many more, but for time constraints here, we'll just take you through a few, just to give you a feel for how we're going to define the data, how we might break it out within SLIM. Now you would use our SLIM Metrics product for this. So SLIM Metrics would be able to take the history from the data manager and it'll let the user analyze it and break it into different categories and let you measure things like productivity and quality, create custom trend lines so you can do benchmarking with SLIM estimate, things like that. So actually, let me go back. So we're going to look at number of systems, industry distribution of projects, geographic distribution, and we're going to look at how that productivity index is distributed across multiple projects. So first slide, real easy. It's showing, from this data set that we've got 82 SAP projects from the QSM database. Okay, and that's what we would use to actually customize SLIM, maybe from a software development type of project over to a package implementation. So we're going to pull in about 82 SAP projects from the QSM database. We can also break that information out by industry type. So you can see here, across all those 82 projects, they vary across industry as well. So I've got aerospace and defense all the way down through wholesale distribution. Okay? So not only can we look at the projects in total, but we can look at them by industry sector and across different geographic locations. So for example here, I've got 4 main geographic locations listed: North America, Latin America, Europe, and Asia Pacific. You can see that we've got a pretty evenly distributed data set across all different parts of the world. 26% of the SAP projects from North America down to 17% in Asia Pacific. This is just another way that we can kind of look at the data within the QSM database, break it out, and use it to your advantage to help you benchmark and tailor to SAP types of projects. Here's a chart kind of showing how we would break out the productivity distribution. So here you can see out of all those projects how they break out by PI or productivity index. Okay, just to give you a little background on the productivity index for those folks that aren't familiar with it. Productivity index is a measure of efficiency. Okay, so if you're using SLIM, every one of your projects or every one of your releases will have a productivity index associated with it. It's a macro measure. It takes into account the environment that you're working in, experience level of the people, complexity of the project that you're working in, things like that. The higher the measure, the better. In this example here, we're looking at, for example, 2 of my SAP projects have PIs that fall in the 8 to 9 range. 8 of our projects fall in the 22 to 23 range. So we're just kind of looking at an overall productivity distribution across all of our SAP projects. The chart below it shows size as it relates to productivity. So in this example, as the SAP projects are getting bigger, the productivity indexes are increasing. So that hopefully gave you a little bit of summary, a little bit of background on how we might approach a package implementation. I'm going to actually open up SLIM now and show you how we would implement that using SLIM. And then I'll leave a few minutes at the end for questions as well. Give me a second here to open this up. Okay. So everybody should see the staffing profile at this point. Okay. So what we're looking at right now is actually SLIM estimate. Okay. This is probably where we'd spend most of our time. This is QSM's flagship product. If I go to the Tools menu, you can see that I can access all the tools in the suite. I'll come back to Slim Estimate in a minute. I wanted to start off with the Data Manager first, just in a little bit of detail, just to give you a feel for the kind of information we want to capture, do a good job of estimating. I'm going to open this up for a second. You can see that I've got a lot of projects loaded in, a lot of SAP types of projects. I'll open up one in particular here, just to give you a feel for what we want to focus on. Now, we don't need a lot of history going into this. We just need some basic information. You can see that we've got 7 or 8 tabs here that go into a lot of detail if we want to. Like if we want to create custom metrics, we want to get really detailed in the sizing area, we want to get a feel for how we did on our estimate, were we 5% off, were we 10% off, things like that. But really all we need to do to start is get a handle on how much work was delivered. Now remember, this is a package implementation that's already been completed, okay? And we're defining size here as an implementation unit. The other type of information that we want to record is the duration and the effort. So size, duration, and effort, so we can calculate that productivity index that I mentioned before. Okay? So now just to give you a feel for the impact of this productivity index, if this were a 12.7 instead of an 11.7, we'd probably be looking at about a $5 million cost or $500,000 cost and about a 2 to 3 month schedule. So about a 30% lower cost, about a 10% better schedule on average with a 1 integer change on this productivity index. Okay, that gives you kind of a feel for the impact of that. So the higher the productivity index, the better you're doing. We break it out by complexity as well. So if you're doing package implementations, business types of systems, those PIs are going to tend to be higher than if you were working on a weapon system, microcode, real-time, things like that. So you would start seeing trends in your data. You'll start seeing ranges, PIs from 11.7 to 12.5, things like that, you know, based on the area in your company that you're working in. So remember, the productivity index takes into account size, duration, and effort, part of the SLIM model, and that's how we calculate the efficiency on each of these projects. Okay, I just wanted to kind of go through that a little bit first. Take you back to SLIM Estimate. Okay, this is where we'd actually probably spend a lot of our time. Now, first thing we can do, once you get started with SLIM, basically you take a 2-day class, a couple of support sessions on WebEx, and then you're running with it. So support's included. Usually what we're doing is we're going ahead and helping you, teaching you how to set up SLIM, create your first template. So we go to the Tools menu here, and another upgrade to SLIM 8.0 is everything that you would use to configure SLIM is under this Tools box here. Okay. First thing we do is we'd open up the project environment and we teach you how to build a template. So if you're doing a software development project and you're converting to a package implementation, we'd probably go ahead and redefine your phases and your milestones. So in this example here, I'm rolling up to 4 high-level phases or divisions or sections, and I've redefined how we're looking at the project. But like any design process, early on we want to figure out, you know, do we want to build it? If so, conceptually, what do we want it to do? We want to come up with requirements. We want to build it, create it, and then we want to test it, and then we want to go live with it. So we're going to go ahead and tailor this to a package implementation, as you can see here. So if this were a software development project, this might say conceptual design, business requirements, main build, and test. But we're just reconfiguring it, redefining how we want to create our phases and even our detailed level information, the milestones, the tasks, things like that. We want to look at, if we want to generate a detailed estimate out of SLIM, in addition to a macro level estimate, we want to create some percentage-based information so that when it generates the cost for phase 2 and phase 3, we knew that the baseline configuration was 30% of phase 3. That way we can get the cost for that lower level task as well. So we're going to go ahead and tailor this specifically to an SAP type of project. That's the first thing we're going to do. Next thing we would do is we would decide, how do we want to approach the estimate? Do we have a lot of information going in, or do we just have a little bit of information going in? So we'd go to the estimate button here and we'd make a decision. Which quick start do we want to get going with, or do we want to start in a more detailed way? For this example, we'll go ahead and start in a more detailed way. Now you're going to notice that even though it's a more detailed way, it's still relatively macro level. We don't need a lot of information to get started. So what a lot of people do is they'll spend a lot of hours figuring out detailed times for individuals, and then they'll realize down the road that, wow, we didn't have the overall schedule right. So what SLIM's going to do is kind of put a stake in the ground up front and figure out, what's the right schedule, what's the right amount of people. So one way to start with that is we're going to put in an approximate start date, which can change. We're going to tell SLIM how we want to allocate our resources. So if this were a level load, we might start from 5 people all the way through and have more of a box shape. You can see here that in this example, we're not doing a level load. We're kind of gradually adding people on and then tailoring people off towards the end. Okay? So we're going to tell SLIM how we want to allocate the people to the project. Next thing we want to do is we want to get a feel for what we have to deliver. Now here again, I'm defining this as implementation units. This is a unit of work, a step or an action to complete a job or complete some piece of work or some action. Several ways to define it. Now you remember in the slides that I had initially shown, we might want to start with a high-level piece of information, like high-level business scenarios and business processes. Now in this example here, I've got 5 business scenarios. Now you remember the business scenario is the higher level information. Like if I'm looking at SLIM, it might be the tools menu. Business processes are going to be a little bit more detailed information. So if I'm looking at SLIM, then I'm looking at the phase and milestone sections, for example, a little bit more detailed information. If I'm thinking about that slide that I showed earlier, Solution Composer, the SAP product, the business scenario would be the financial accounting section, and underneath would be the business processes where we're looking at business payroll types of information, general ledger information, the more detailed information. So in this example, I've got about 45 business processes and about 5 business scenarios. You can see I've got the gearing factors set up again. Each business scenario on average is about 1,600 implementation units per component, right? 320 for the processes, 450 for the rights F objects. Remember, in addition, on an SAP package, we're going to have some custom development type of work. We're going to have to create interfaces to the software that we already have in the organization. That might be my high-level start to this. As I get a little bit more information, a little bit more comfortable, I want to break that information out into more detail if I can. Now remember, if I don't have this level of detail, that's okay. We can still do a macro-level estimate to get started. In this example here, I've got the business scenarios now broken out into complexity bins. I've got simple ones, average ones, and complex ones. Again, 1, 3, and 2 are the number of components, and then I've broken them out using gearing factors. I'm using gearing factors to get a feel for how hard is it to deliver this piece of work. So in this example here, you can see that the average business scenarios are about twice as complex as the simple ones. And then I've got the complex ones here that are about 4 times as difficult as the simple ones. So it gives us a good feel for how much work are we actually going to have to deliver. And you can see that I've broken this out in quite a bit of detail here. Business processes, same thing, complexity bin, simple, average, complex. Then I've got my rights F objects, reports, interfaces, conversions, enhancements, and forms, all broken out into those simple, average, and complex areas. So I've got a nice template built that I can reuse over and over again. Maybe it takes me 30 minutes to an hour to build the first one, right? Maybe it takes QSM an hour to teach you how to do this for the first time, but then you've got the template built and you can reuse it over and over again. So once I get a handle on size, it fills in here, and I can tell SLIM if I'm not really sure about this. If I've got a high level of uncertainty, I'm going to tell SLIM that. This is actually a nice benefit to using SLIM, okay? Some of the other tools out there don't allow you to this type of flexibility. So when I look at the risk in SLIM and when I run that estimate, I can build buffer into it, and I can look at a conservative estimate alongside a more liberal estimate. Next thing I want to do is get a handle on that productivity index that I had explained in the PowerPoint slides. A couple ways to get this number. Remember, it's an index. Higher the measure, the better. A couple ways to get it. I can use the QSM database, right? I can specify, what type of system it is. I can create my own custom trend lines using SLIM metrics. So I can have a custom trend line just for my package implementations or just for my SAP projects to get a productivity index that's specific to the project I'm about to get started with. Now, if I'm using the QSM industry database, then I might want to, if I want to, I don't have to do this, but if I want to, I can go in and answer some questions about my project to tune that industry number a little bit more towards me. You can see the list of questions on your screen here. Now, another thing that is relatively new with SLIM 8.0 is that we can tailor all these questions now. Okay, I mentioned that in the earlier part of the presentation. Just wanted to remind you that all this is tailorable. So these questions can be designed for a package implementation, or if you have another group in your company that's doing just infrastructure projects, we can tailor it for that as well. Software development, hardware, it's flexible. So I'm going to get a feel for the size. I'm going to get a feel for the productivity index. If I have some history, I'm going to leverage that. If I've got SAP projects that I've already completed, I'm going to use those for my productivity. And the only other thing left to enter in is what my goals are. Okay, like I have to get done in 12 months, or I have a certain budget that I'm working with. Once I put that information in, SLIM runs the estimate for me and brings me to this analysis area where I've got a nice picture of my staffing profile broken out by phase. If I want, all these views toggle to report as well. So I can get all the numbers in detail, and I can export this out to Microsoft Excel if I want. Got a nice summary of my estimate on the bottom. It's telling me 11 months with 12,000 person hours, 10 people. Gives me a good feel for the risk. Now remember, I told SLIM that I had a certain amount of time and a certain budget. And I also told SLIM that I needed a certain percentage chance to feel comfortable. 80% was my target. This could be 99% if I want it to be. But that's what this black shaded region is here. That's where I want to be. What SLIM is telling me here is that it's probably not going to happen. I only have about a 65% chance of getting done when I want to. Okay? So I run that initial estimate after I build my template. It brings me here. It tells me I'm in trouble. Now to my left, I've got a navigator. I can look at all these different views that describe my estimate. Okay? Workbooks, underneath the workbooks are the views that describe the estimate. Okay? In this example, it's telling me I'm in trouble. So now I'm looking at this going, okay, what am I going to do about it? Well, within a couple seconds here, I can run a whole new estimate that gets me done on time with buffer built in. I can log that estimate into a solution log, give it a name, and now I have it whenever I need it. When I click on one of these estimates, these are all estimates for the same release or the same project or the same feature. Once I click on one of these, what happens is it updates all these views for that estimate so I can negotiate it. Now, in addition to that, I've got my estimate here in blue, and now I can sanity check it. So all these black data points would be your SAP projects that you've completed in the past, and then the QSM trend line here would be all the SAP projects in the industry database, from the QSM industry database. Or I can be more general than that and just have all packages as well, or I can break it out into subsets. So now when I run that estimate, I can feel comfortable that it's consistent with the other SAP projects that I had completed and also what the industry database says. Now what we want to avoid is signing up to something way down here. So what a lot of people will do is they'll spend days doing a detailed plan to something way down here. What SLIM will do is it'll put a flashlight on what's reasonable early so that you can spend all that planning time working to something that's reasonable. That way we don't throw money away. I've also got a nice financial reporting system built in that gives me the cost rate information, cumulative cost. I can break all this stuff out into detail if I want, all at the touch of a button. And I can break out the cost by skill category as well. And this all goes to a chart as well. Okay, so that's kind of an overview of SLIM Estimate. Now, in addition to that, I'm going to come back to this in a second. I kind of wanted to show you a little bit of a bigger picture, just briefly. This is master plan. Some of you may be familiar with this, some not. This master plan comes with SLIM Estimate. It allows us to aggregate all those projects together. So here I've got multiple projects. These could be related or unrelated. I've got other related costs built in, like my planning costs, my overhead costs, my training costs. Each of these black bars gives me a summary of that section, and then underneath that black bar is the cost for the individual task or project release. Now again, this example is an agile example, an iterative type of approach, but this could be non-iterative as well. All these projects could be independent of one another, and I just want to see the big picture. And then I can answer questions like, What happens if things change on my estimate? What if I change my mind? What if the requirements change? What if I have scope creep? Things change, my requirements change early. What if I realize later that my productivity index is probably not going to be as good as I thought? Or what if I have to move people from one project release to another? How will that impact my whole organization or the whole system level project that I'm working on? So within a few seconds, I make those changes in all those projects in the organization. I hit OK, and it runs a whole new estimate for me within a few seconds and gives me a big picture view and a nice report to go along with it in detail. And I can answer questions on the fly as well, like what if one release slips? How does that affect the overall cost and effort on my program or within my overall organization? So back to SLIM estimate, they all come together, so I just wanted to show you that briefly. So in a nutshell, to support an SAP project, there's some basic things we want to remember. We want to tailor the life cycle to represent the type of project you're working on. So if I have a template already built for software development or some other type of project, I want to change the phases and milestones and whatever detailed information I have to represent the new project, the SAP package or the Oracle type of project. I want to get a feel for sizing. I want to get a good handle on it. I want to redefine it based on what I have to deliver. Early on in the project, it might be high-level business scenarios. As I get a little more information, I might be able to break that out into more detail. And then that productivity index. I want to be able to get a feel for the efficiency. And the nice thing about it is I can use my own history if I have some. So I bring in my projects from the data manager that comes with it. If I don't have any of my own history, that's okay too. Then I'll use the QSM database. We've got hundreds of package implementation types of projects, phone support's included, so we would be able to help you. We would be able to help you set this up and get a productivity index that's relevant. And then I would generate my estimate, and I would use SLIM to help me negotiate the results and figure out what's the best plan going forward. And then I would be able to use my SAP database, either from the QSM database or my own history, to sanity check the estimate. So that would be pretty much it in summary. So now I'll open everything up to questions.
And just to make everybody aware, there will be a replay available, and I'll send the link of that shortly. So as soon as this is over, I'll send that out. And the first question that we had was, if there is no historical data in my database and I'm using SLIM for the first time, how do I know if the PI I'm using is high or low?
Good question. You'd be able to use that, use the QSM database to figure out if that productivity index is reasonable or not. So we've got hundreds of projects of SAP products or SAP projects, and we know the productivity indexes for each of those, and we'd be able to see, what PI is reasonable and which are more outside the curve.
Are all of the projects in the SLIM ERP data set SAP implementations, or does it include other types of ERP as well?
Includes other types of ERP as well. SAP is just a subset. We've got hundreds of other types of projects as well.
Okay. What other types of projects can SLIM estimate?
We can estimate really any type of design process. So software development, software maintenance, hardware development and design, infrastructure types of projects, like the development of call centers, the installation of software and computers and servers, package implementations, really anything that you can model that is a design process we can estimate with SLIM.
How do you get the data for the QSM database?
The way we get, good question, the way we get the data from the QSM database is from people that we work with, so SLIM clients and QSM consulting clients. So basically we do a ton of work with people in the tools area, as well as people hire us to do independent estimates and benchmarking research and things like that. And a lot of the clients like to be part of the trend lines that you see in the SLIM tools. They like to be part of the research. They like to see themselves reflected. And so they really like to work with us in that area. So that's a nice thing about QSM is we don't usually go out. In fact, we don't go out and buy databases that we're not familiar with. It's people that we work with on a consistent basis.
How are you defining an implementation unit for an SAP project?
An implementation unit is actually a unit of work. So what we try to do, I mean, we start at a high level with high-level business processes, but what we want to do, is, if we can, is get a feel for how hard or set that up. And an implementation unit is a way to measure how much work goes into setting up or configuring a business process.
How do clients get access to the QSM database?
They get access in the form of trend lines that are shipped with the product. Also, SLIM is based on the latest information from the QSM database. So we're always updating SLIM and the QSM database so it's current. Because when we're doing estimates, we want everything to be current with today's technology. So basically, well, and go ahead and rephrase. Tell me the question one more time. Sorry.
Basically, how do clients get access to the QSM database?
Okay, yeah, through trend lines in the tools and phone support. So if you need some typical productivity measures for SAP projects, for example, we can get on the phone with you and help you with that. So really through the phone support and through, at a high level, through the tool licenses.
One person wants to know, will the data from my project get published to the QSM database?
No, it will not, only if you want us to. So we go through a strict validation process, looking at all the data and information, and clients that we work with have us sign non-disclosures, and we definitely get permission to use the data points in the QSM database. So if you don't want to be part of that, there's absolutely no, not necessary at all. A lot of our clients, have confidentiality issues, and we're not allowed to use their information in the QSM database.
Can you explain what a gearing factor is?
Sure. What gearing factors do, gearing factors basically allow us to normalize across different sizing units. For example, I use number of implementation units as a way to explain, the differences of complexity, right, between those business processes, between simple and complex. So really, it's the smallest unit of work that lets us compare different work actions across an organization or within a project. So it's just bringing consistency and normalization to the way we size. I guess that's probably the best way to answer it.
So how do we come up with gearing factors for infrastructure and process components?
Well, some of that will be from the QSM database, right? So if the project that you're working on we have experience in, then we'll be able to go into the QSM database and pull out industry numbers, like typical lines of code per business requirement, things like that. If you're doing something that is not in the QSM database, then we'll rely on your historical data. So we go back and we talk to you and figure out, what exactly do you want to deliver and what goes into creating that piece of work. And we try to set up a process where you can bring some consistency to getting that information pulled together. So QSM database or your own history.
Do you have any way to track the project once you estimate it?
Yes, actually, we have a product called SLIM Control. I'll open it up here briefly for you. So SLIM Control, once we get a plan from SLIM Estimate, we can import that into SLIM Control. SLIM Control actually provides a dashboard analysis of the measures that you might care about. So here I'm looking at duration and size and defects. This is actually a software development project. Remember, on packages, we're also going to, a lot of times we're going to have a software development component to that. We're going to have to do some custom development so that the package that you're buying works with the software that you're already using. So, in this example here, SLIM Control, we have the baseline plan. That red line that you see was my initial plan from SLIM Estimate. And now once a month, I'm going to put in some actuals. And we don't need a lot of detail, just the totals, right? We don't need all the timesheet data, just the totals once a month. total people that were on the project, total work that was delivered, and any custom metrics that you want to track. And then you'll see your actuals at these blue data points. You'll see how they map up to your initial baseline plan from Slim Estimate, and you can see if you're getting in trouble or not. And actually, I don't know if a lot of the audience does outsourcing. We support outsourcing as well as in-house work. So if you're looking at different vendors, you can use Slim Estimate to see if those vendor bids are good, you know, which vendor bid is the most realistic, and you're going to be able to see what the productivity index is. Whether the vendor knows what a productivity index is or not, you're going to see what that is, because they're going to have to tell you how much work they're going to deliver and how long it's going to take, right? They're promising you a budget and a duration. You're going to see what their productivity index is. Then with Slim Control, you can track that vendor, right? And you're going to be able to see the actual PI that they're working to. So if you look at this here, whether this is in-house or vendor, the plan was 152,000 lines of code, or a certain number of RICEF objects, or a certain number of requirements, or a certain number of features. It's all user definable. And you're going to see how much money that they had planned to charge you, and you're going to see what their productivity index was. Then as you get into the project, you're going to see how much work they're actually finishing, how many people they actually put on the project, and then what their productivity index actually is. So Slim Control takes the actual duration that has elapsed, the actual effort spent, and the actual work that's been delivered, and it's going to calculate that PI and tell you if they're working to the level of efficiency that they had promised. Okay, so you can use this to monitor a vendor as well as your own in-house development. Once you're into the project, and it's like Slim's telling me here that I'm going to be late, the yellow light's on, you can go in and look at trade-offs just like you did in Slim Estimate. So I can come in here and say, okay, that vendor may say, look, you know, don't worry, we'll get it done, we'll just add people. Right? Within a couple seconds, I can run a new estimate right from Slim Control and see the impact of them adding all those people. A lot of times we find there's actually diminishing returns when we add people. In this example, that's coming true here. It's going to cost you as the customer, you're going to go from 5.6 to 7.6 million. You're only going to save a couple months. So these are things you can use Slim Control to help you decide and help you manage your vendor or your in-house work. So I hit 45 people, I run an estimate, I hit OK, and it updates this dashboard now for that new estimate with more people. Now, if I was using a spreadsheet, that might take me a lot of time, maybe a couple hours to do that, maybe longer, to look at the impact of adding people or changing hours or changing efficiency or changing the amount of work. With Slim Control, I did it within a few seconds. So we can definitely support any tracking and oversight needs that you have as well.
So I think this is kind of in the same vein. One user was saying that in some cases they use external vendors where they have to test only effort. How would they model this in Slim?
Well, they would just run an estimate with effort. And in Slim, you can actually specify a constraint. You can have a whole group of constraints, like I got to get done in a certain amount of time with a certain effort goal and a certain number of people, or you can have Slim build a project plan. If all that you care about is the effort, you can have Slim specify a specific constraint, and it'll build a project plan that meets those effort goals. And if you mean just the testing phase, we can do that as well. If you're just estimating the test effort, we can break Slim out. We can look at the overall project, and we can break it out, the testing part of that, or we can take a testing project on its own and estimate that individually as well. That's what you meant by testing.
I think we have time for one more question. This is in regards to what you were presenting before. What is a business scenario?
A business scenario would be a high-level description of a business process. So I had it broken out into two areas. I had business scenarios and business processes. Business scenario is just a higher-level definition. So for example, in that slide I showed the Solution Composer, that SAP product, there was a section in the software for financial accounting, and then underneath that you had it broken out into detail, like general ledger, payroll, human resources, things like that. Those detailed things like human resources and payroll are the business processes. The business scenario would be everything that falls under the higher level, the section that everything falls underneath. So it would be the financial accounting part of that. So it's the higher level description of a business process. It's something that needs to be done in your company at a high level.
I think that wraps everything up. Would like to thank everybody for joining us today. And once again, there will be a replay available that I will be sending out shortly. And feel free to contact Keith directly if you have any additional questions. And if we didn't get a chance to get to your question, he'll be following up with you shortly. So thanks again for joining us today.
Yep, thanks everybody. Thanks Elizabeth. Appreciate it.